Cleopatra, the woman history feared. History does not remember some women as queens, it remembers them as threats. Cleopatra. This was not a love story. She was a woman who shook empires, terrified Rome, and chose even her own death. She did not rule with her beauty, she ruled with her mind. In a world written by men, she changed the course of history. This is not the story of a queen. This is the story of the last pharaoh. And this story did not begin in silence. It ended in blood. History does not simply remember some names. It whispers them in the dark, from one generation to another. And one of those names has echoed through centuries with both admiration and fear. Cleopatra. They called her a queen, a seductress, a legend. But Cleopatra was not a woman written by history. She was a woman who forced history to rewrite itself. The Silent Cry of Egypt. 69 BC. The Nile flowed as it always had, slow and eternal. But Egypt's heart was restless. Once a glorious civilization, now living under the long shadow of Rome. There were pharaohs, yes, but real power had already slipped away. And into this crumbling world, a child was born. Her name, Cleopatra VII Philopater. This was no ordinary birth. She was the last great hope of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The curse of the Golden Throne. Cleopatra's family was not Egyptian. They were descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals. They were Greek. And here was the irony. The rulers of Egypt did not even speak the language of its people. Cleopatra was different. A princess's silent weapon. From a young age, Cleopatra stood out, not for beauty, but for intelligence. She mastered multiple languages: Greek, Latin, Aramaic, Hebrew, Ethiopian, and most importantly, Egyptian. She would become the first ruler of her dynasty to truly speak to her people. But in her family, intelligence was dangerous. Lessons written in blood. Cleopatra grew up in the palace, but this was no fairy tale. The palace was a place of betrayal, poisoned wine, and siblings who vanished in the night. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was a ruler drowning in Roman debt. To keep his throne, he sold his people and surrendered Egypt piece by piece. Cleopatra watched it all. She learned. Beauty was never enough. History sold us a myth that Cleopatra conquered men with beauty alone. Ancient sources tell a different story. They agree on one thing. Her voice and her mind were irresistible. When Cleopatra spoke, people listened because she knew exactly what she was doing. The first price of power. At 18, Cleopatra ascended the throne after her father's death. But a woman could not rule alone. She was forced to marry her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, and share power. A child king, backed by ruthless men. Cleopatra understood immediately. This was not a marriage, this was war. Exile. Her name was erased from official records, her statues torn down, and one night she was driven into exile, into the desert, alone. But this was not the end. This was her true beginning. The desert wind is cruel, but Cleopatra's mind was sharper. Rome was coming, and a man was about to step onto Egypt's stage. Julius Caesar. Cleopatra no longer wanted to survive, she wanted to rule. And to do that, she would have to enter a room with the most powerful man in the world. And her plan to do so would become one of the boldest moments in history. Desert nights are never silent. They simply choose not to speak. And during every night of exile, Cleopatra knew one thing. If she did not return, she would be erased from history. But Cleopatra never waited for fate. She challenged it. Rome's shadow falls on the Nile. 48 BC. Rome was burning with civil war. On one side, the Senate. On the other, one man, Gaius Julius Caesar. Caesar arrived in Egypt chasing his enemy Pompey. But Pompey never reached him. He was murdered. And Ptolemy XIII's men presented Pompey's severed head to Caesar as a gift. It was a fatal mistake, because Caesar did not forgive such acts, even against his enemies. In that moment, Egypt's fate passed into Roman hands. One woman, one plan. Cleopatra did not hesitate. She did not flee. She did not beg. She designed one of the boldest plans in history. She would face Caesar. But the palace was guarded. If discovered, she would be executed. She had to become invisible, wrapped in destiny. One night, a small boat reached the palace by the Nile. It carried an ordinary package, a carpet, or, according to some sources, a linen sack. The servants carried it into Caesar's chamber. No one suspected a thing, until the carpet was unrolled, and from within it stepped a woman, dust-covered, exhausted, unbroken. Cleopatra. History shifted in that instant. Caesar and Cleopatra first encounter. Caesar was surprised, but he did not recoil, because the woman before him was no ordinary queen. She knew what she wanted. She knew what she was saying. And most importantly, she was fearless. Cleopatra spoke, and Caesar listened. This was not the beginning of a romance, but of an alliance. A throne built on intelligence. Cleopatra offered Caesar loyalty, wealth, the power of Egypt. Caesar gave her an army, legitimacy, Roman protection. For Ptolemy XIII, this was a death sentence. The palace erupted in chaos. Rebellion spread. Roman soldiers flooded the streets, and the Nile once again ran red. Ptolemy XIII tried to escape, but his armor was too heavy. His boat overturned. The boy king drowned in the river. The throne now belonged to Cleopatra. Every victory has a price. Cleopatra had won, but Rome remained, and Caesar did not leave. Months passed. Then came the truth that would shake the world. Cleopatra was pregnant. And the child she carried was not just a prince. He was a threat to Rome.
Rome was not just a city that ruled the world. It was a stage where destinies were decided, and Cleopatra chose to step onto that stage. Rome of gold and whispers. 46 BC. When Cleopatra sailed from the Nile to Rome, she carried more than treasures. She carried a secret. She was carrying Caesar's child. Rome was divided when she arrived. Some saw a queen, others saw a danger, because Rome despised kings and Cleopatra did not hide her crown. The woman in Caesar's shadow. Caesar did not treat Cleopatra as a guest. He gave her a palace in Rome. The Senate was outraged. Then came the true shock. Cleopatra gave birth to a son. His name? Ptolemy 15 Caesar. History would remember him as Caesarion, son of Caesar. For Rome, this was a nightmare. Silent wars begin with fear. Whispers filled the Senate. What if Caesar wants a monarchy? What if this child becomes Rome's heir? The Senate was afraid. Cleopatra sensed it, but she did not retreat. She was no longer just a queen. She was a mother to a dynasty. The Ides of March. 44 BC, March 15th. Caesar entered the Senate unarmed, among men he trusted. Knives followed. 23 wounds. Rome's most powerful man fell, and Cleopatra was left alone. A woman, a child, and escape. With Caesar gone, Cleopatra had no protection. The Senate wanted her gone, and Caesarion was a liability. One night, Cleopatra fled Rome, quietly, leaving behind not gold, but a shattered future. Return to Egypt and a dark decision. Back in Egypt, Cleopatra still held the throne, but she ruled alongside her brother, Ptolemy 14. This was a problem, and Cleopatra acted. He died soon after, officially from illness. History whispers otherwise. A new heir. Cleopatra crowned Caesarion as co-ruler. Now everything was clear. A mother, a queen, and an imperial dream. But Rome was not finished. Caesar was dead, but Rome was still hungry, and a new name was about to rise: Mark Antony.
Caesar was dead, but Rome lived on. And now, Rome was divided into three. 3 men, 1 world. 43 BC. Power was split between Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus. The East belonged to Antony, and that meant Cleopatra was called. A stage set in Tarsus. Antony summoned Cleopatra to answer for herself. But Cleopatra did not arrive like an accused queen. She arrived like a legend. A golden ship, purple sails, silver oars. She dressed as Aphrodite. Antony was defeated before a word was spoken. Passion and power. This was no ordinary love. It was the union of ambition, loneliness, and hunger for empire. 3 children were born. Antony chose Cleopatra over Rome, and Rome would never forgive that. The Red Line. Antony gave lands, crowns, titles. Cleopatra was named Queen of Kings. Octavian waited. War was inevitable. 31 BC. The Battle of Actium. The war was lost before it truly began. Fall and flight. Cleopatra retreated. Antony followed. Octavian triumphed. Believing Cleopatra dead, Antony took his own life. He died in her arms. The final choice. Octavian wanted Cleopatra alive, for humiliation, for spectacle. She refused.
The silent bite. A basket, a serpent. Cleopatra crowned herself and chose death over chains. The end of an era. Cleopatra died. Caesarion was executed. Egypt fell. But Cleopatra became eternal. Because legends do not die.